No one is born a genius. You did not wake up with some secret operating system installed in your skull. You woke up as a human, messy impulses, raw curiosity, fear of rejection, and a desperate need to belong. Then life started assigning you the wrong stages. Try to imagine a fish being forced to climb a tree. You can hit it with discipline, you can drown it in effort, you can punish it for not performing. It will still fail. The tragedy is not that it fails. The tragedy is that everyone around it will call it lazy, defective, or not trying hard enough because they refuse to understand one brutal principle. Talent is not magic. Talent is fit, and fit is environment, plus time, plus the courage to choose. And that is what this video is really about. Not how to be smarter, not how to hustle. It is about how people quietly destroy their own potential because they worship the wrong definition of success. Welcome back to the Hidden Self. This is the place where we stop pretending. We don't do motivational fairy tales. We talk about the uncomfortable wiring inside human beings that makes them sabotage themselves over and over while smiling politely and calling it growth. Here is the uncomfortable truth. Most people do not want to become their best self. They want to become acceptable. They want to be liked. They want to be validated. They want to win without risking the one thing that actually leads to mastery, failure inside a field that is truly yours. So let's start with the simplest question you keep avoiding. Why do you keep choosing the wrong stage? Because you have been trained to treat your life like a performance exam. You are graded, ranked, compared, and rewarded when you imitate the dominant template. And genius in this world is usually just the person who got placed into the role where their natural strengths can show. Everyone else is punished for not being a different species. When people say he was born gifted, they are not describing reality. They are describing their comfort. It feels safer to believe talent is predetermined because then your failures feel like fate, not responsibility. If genius is genetic destiny, then you can stop trying and you can stop analyzing yourself. You can call it not my time and move on with your life still trapped. But if genius is fit, then your failures are information. They are not proof that you are doomed. They are proof that something in your choices, your environment, or your identity is misaligned. Let's unpack that alignment, because this is where the real psychological depth starts. First, the stage. Society loves the story that talent is a mystical flame you either have or you don't. Yet if you watch closely, what you call genius is usually a person who is working with the correct feedback loop. Their mind connects dots quickly in that domain because it has been designed for that kind of pattern recognition. Their body knows what to do because they are wired to find certain sensations satisfying. Their emotions stop them from quitting because they experience meaning, not just pressure. A genius is often someone who found the kind of work where time disappears. They are not always the best. They are the ones who become durable. They keep returning. They keep experimenting. They keep failing in productive ways because the failures feel like part of learning, not like humiliation. Here is a micro story you probably recognize. A person you went to school with becomes great at something you never expected. Maybe it's mechanics, maybe it's cooking, maybe it's editing videos, maybe it's working with audio. They were bad at school because the school punished their style of thinking. Their curiosity didn't fit the curriculum. Their attention didn't fit the classroom noise. Their emotions didn't cooperate with that rigid grading system, so they were labeled. They internalized that label. They carried it like a secret shame. Then later, in a place where practical feedback made sense, they suddenly had traction. They did not become magically brilliant. They just finally got access to the stage that matched their nature. They found the arena where their mind could interpret the world efficiently. And you might ask, why couldn't the school see it earlier? Because institutions are not built to discover your unique genius. They are built to produce standardized output. The system doesn't care if you grow. It cares if you comply. That's the first hidden self mechanism. People confuse being trained with being developed. Training is compliance. Development is discovery. Most people are trained to be good. Good grades, good manners, good resumes, good emotional silence, good obedience. But goodness does not equal genius. Genius is what emerges when you stop forcing your inner organism into a shape it doesn't want. Now, the second truth, the one people hate because it reveals their own complicity. Envy. Envy is not just a feeling. Envy is a cognitive strategy. It steals your attention and then uses that stolen attention to distort reality. You look at someone else's success, and instead of studying it, you start threatening yourself with it. You think, they were born better than me. You think, they have something I don't. You think, if I can't match them, I have no value. And then your brain does something clever and cruel. It replaces learning with mimicry. You stop asking what you actually enjoy. You stop asking what you naturally understand. You stop asking what your body leans toward when no one is watching. Instead, you ask, how do I look like them? That question creates a very specific kind of misery. You become an imitator of someone else's life, and then you wonder why you feel empty while performing. You chase the costume and forget the person inside it. Think about the way social media turns this into a machine. Someone posts a highlight reel of being confident, attractive, productive, witty, admired. You watch. Your brain converts that image into a threat assessment. It says, if you don't become that, you will be left behind. So you start curating your identity, not constructing it. You stop living in alignment and start living in anticipation of judgment. This is why people can work hard and still feel hollow. They are not working on mastery, they are working on reputation. When your motivation is reputation, every obstacle becomes personal. Every slow day becomes proof you are a fraud. Every rejection becomes a verdict on your worth. And genius, real genius, cannot grow in that environment. You can't experiment when you are terrified of being seen failing. You can't take risks when you need to appear safe. So envy does not just make you sad, envy makes you dumb. It narrows your perspective until you can only see the gap between you and them, not the path between you and your own potential. Now let's go deeper, because the third trap is the one that makes this all feel inevitable. The trap is identity borrowing. Most people do not have a stable self. They have an external self that changes based on feedback. They are addicted to being affirmed. They are trained to believe their value is something the world must grant. So they borrow identity from whatever is currently rewarded. If you see a person with money, you borrow financial freedom as your identity. If you see a person with fame, you borrow being seen as your identity. If you see a person with status, you borrow importance as your identity. If you see a person with aesthetic, you borrow being attractive as your identity. If you see a person with power, you borrow winning as your identity. But none of that is you. It is an accessory. It looks like you from a distance, but it does not respond to your internal needs. It doesn't care what energizes you. It doesn't care what makes you feel alive. Then you wake up one day, and you cannot explain why you are exhausted. You have achieved things. You have done the right steps. You have built a life that should satisfy you according to the script, and still you feel like a ghost in your own house. That is the moment the hidden self starts to scream. Not in words, in symptoms, in insomnia, in anxiety loops, in emotional numbness, in that quiet dread right before you open your phone, in the way your chest tightens when you hear congratulations, because your life was never built around your internal truth. It was built around borrowed validation. A person might study a subject because their friends are studying it, not because they are curious about it. They might start a business because they saw creators praising passive income, not because they love solving problems for a real audience. They might build a career because they wanted status, not because they wanted meaning. These are rented dreams. They are shiny and they attract attention, but they don't nourish the person underneath. And here is the cruel part. Rented dreams still demand labor. You still have to show up. You still have to learn. You still have to fail. But now the failures don't teach you. They shame you. So the person becomes trapped in a cycle where they constantly prove they deserve their role and they never feel like they belong in it. You might even have your own version. Maybe you work in a field you tolerate. Maybe you act like you're fine. Maybe you tell people, this is just a phase. But inside, you have felt for years that you are not using your real talent. You are surviving instead of creating. And the most dangerous thought is this: I'm behind. I should be further. Maybe I'm not good enough. That thought makes you chase the next ladder instead of returning to your own soil. Now, the fourth trap, and this one is institutional as well as personal. Systems produce panic. Education, work, and corporate culture often reward speed and conformity. They measure you with numbers, titles, followers, grades, approvals, and output metrics. They turn learning into competition and competition into identity. So you grow up thinking your worth is a score. 10 is good, 8 is average, 6 is worthless. Nobody asked whether you were happy. Nobody asked whether your brain was built for that kind of task. Nobody asked whether you had permission to be slow, weird, or unfinished. Instead, kids become performers of competence. The goal becomes not to understand, but to look successful. And then adulthood continues that same logic with different costumes. Now the scores are salary, promotions, relationships that look impressive on paper, a house in the right neighborhood, a social calendar, a body type that matches marketing, and a brand that signals you are worth attention. When your life is defined this way, your real self becomes a threat because your real self is unpredictable. Your real self wants curiosity. Your real self wants meaning over applause. Your real self might prefer quiet craft over public noise, so you suppress it, you bury it under productivity, you label it laziness when it asks for rest, you label it immaturity when it asks for experimentation, you label it instability when it refuses to fit the template, you label it selfish when it wants your own pace. Then you wonder why you feel detached. It's because you stopped listening to your internal signals. The hidden self is not some mystical demon. It is your own mind protecting itself from pain. When you suppress your real preferences, you reduce emotional conflict in the short term, but in the long term, you create a life that doesn't match your nervous system. That mismatch slowly becomes chronic stress. You can call it burnout. But often it's not burnout from overwork, it's burnout from betrayal. You are betraying your own nature every day. Now, this is where the video has to get honest in a way that actually helps. If genius is fit, what does fit require? It requires choosing the right arena. It requires refusing to treat your life like a courtroom where you are always on trial. It requires the courage to accept that some parts of you do not belong in every room. Here's an example that feels small but is actually huge. Ask yourself what makes time stop, not what gets praise, not what makes you money immediately, not what looks impressive, what makes you lose track of time even when it's hard. What do you do when no one asked you to? What do you keep returning to even if it scares you? That is not a random hobby. That is a signal. That is your mind leaning toward its own feedback loop. And if you ignore it, you will keep selecting arenas that punish you. You will keep blaming yourself. If you listen to it, you will start building mastery with less friction because you are finally in a stage that makes sense. But people don't want this because listening requires disobedience. You have to disobey the crowd. You have to disobey the voice that says, this must be safe. You have to disobey the fear that says, if you are not good enough, you will be rejected. You have to disobey the obsession with being like everyone else. This is why the journey back to your own stage is not comfortable. It's not just a personal development adventure. It's a psychological confrontation with your own conditioning. You will lose relationships, not because you are bad, because you are no longer performing the role that made other people feel secure. Some people need you to stay as the version of you that they understand. When you change, they feel uncertainty. They don't necessarily want to harm you, but they rely on the old script, so they will criticize you. Subtly, politely. Why are you wasting your time? They will discourage you. That won't work. They will romanticize the old path. At least it's stable. It's not just external pressure. It also becomes internal pressure. Your own nervous system learns to fear the stage where you might be seen failing, so the hidden self will try to lure you back. It will say, maybe you should just settle. It will say, maybe you are not that special. It will say, maybe talent doesn't exist and you should stop dreaming. And if you believe that, you stay stuck. Now, let's talk about the weirdly hopeful part. Real genius is not always flashy. A lot of genius is quiet. The person who repairs something with a strange ear for mechanical details. The person who can smell when bread is ready. The person who reads soil and predicts seasons. The person who hears a problem in a workflow just by listening. The person who can translate messy thoughts into clean stories. These people are often invisible because society only celebrates high visibility performance. The system loves the top of the mountain. It doesn't know what to do with the craft that happens in plain daylight. But genius is there. It's just not always marketed. This reveals something about your own psychology, too. If you only respect visible achievement, you will unconsciously betray your own type of brilliance. You will chase spectacle instead of skill. You might even hate yourself for not being charismatic. You might assume charisma is the same as genius. It's not. Charisma is a style. Genius is fit, attention, and depth in a domain that pulls your soul toward it. What the social world calls talent is often either luck or exposure or correct placement. What the social world rarely measures is alignment, and alignment is internal. It's your capacity to be loyal to your own nature, even when it makes you look